This third Sunday in Advent is known in the Church as Gaudete Sunday. Gaudete is a word which means joyful. It is certainly easy to see where this Sunday derives its name. In our first reading from the book of Zephaniah, we hear, "Shout for joy, O daughter Zion, sing joyfully, O Israel." And in our second reading from Paul's letter to the Philippians, we hear, "Brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord always. I shall say it again, rejoice." We are joyful because we recognize our Christmas celebration is near. For this special Sunday in Advent, we wear rose-colored vestments and we light the pink candle on the Advent wreath. This joyful celebration reminds us that the Lord is near, and his coming into our hearts and our lives is joyfully anticipated. It also means that our time for conversion before Christmas draws short. With that in mind, I would like to continue my talk on the 7 deadly sins. As you recall, the 7 deadly sins are gluttony, lust, anger, pride, envy, greed, and sloth. The first Sunday of Advent, I spoke of gluttony, lust, and envy. Last Sunday, I spoke of anger and pride. Today, I would like to speak about greed and sloth. I believe you will see that these sins are often related, leading or feeding into one another. They also lead to many other lesser sins. And for this reason, these sins have historically been singled out for attention because they can be so pervasive in our lives. So, greed is the sin of wanting more than our fair share. And I realize that that is a rather vague definition. You might rightly ask, but Father, what is my fair share? And that is certainly going to differ based on one's gifts and talents and one's situation in life. Someone who has put themselves through college and graduate school may be entitled to more than one who has not finished high school. A family of 7 may be entitled to more than a family of 4. In other words, it does depend on the individual situation, but most people know when they are asking for more than they need. Greed is the sin of wanting to acquire more than we need to live comfortably. When we want to live not just comfortably, but luxuriously, and especially when we do so at the expense of others, we are guilty of the sin of greed. Greed can also be the desire to accumulate wealth or material possessions for their own sake. At the heart of this sin is a lack of trust in God, which is why the Lord Jesus taught us to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." Often people accumulate wealth and possessions for other reasons as well. Maybe because they want to be popular or famous. Maybe because they desire power or the deference of others that wealth brings. Maybe they desire to live comfortably without work, which is the sin of sloth, which I will discuss next. And so here again we can see that the sin of greed can lead to other sins, like pride, envy, and sloth. Sloth is, in a word, laziness. It is the desire to receive things without working for them, the desire to have others do our work for us. There is also a kind of laziness regarding our spiritual life, which is called acedia. This is where we believe God's favor or grace will come to us without any effort on our part. The sin of acedia leads to a lack of prayer. It also leads to our failure to give time to God, as for example, missing Mass on Sundays for no reason other than laziness. With regard to our work or our families, Sloth is simply not being responsible, not doing the work we need for our welfare and that of others. It can also be seen in the desire to have someone else do work for which we will take the credit. Sloth can be seen also as putting off until tomorrow what you should be doing today. In other words, procrastination. A good example of sloth might be seen in history. Many of you know that I travel with my good friend, Father Drew Wood, and we go to many different Civil War historical sites. This period of American history holds a fascination for us. The end result of this great conflict in our nation was, gratefully, the abolition of slavery. Slavery as an institution was itself wrong. God did not create people to be held as or even seen as property. At its heart, slavery was the ultimate expression of sloth. Slave owners lived lives of great luxury and created an entire culture of ease and comfort, but it was created at the expense of those who engaged in backbreaking labor to provide it, and who themselves lived in poverty and want. The opposite virtue to greed is charity, and the opposite virtue to sloth is action. Now, I thought I would also like to take this opportunity to talk to you once again about our capital campaign. We have to date raised over $3 million, which is good. But we are still short of our goal by about $700,000. Our participation as a parish is up to 33%, but we have historically done 50%. Now, I know there is campaign fatigue. You've participated in 4 campaigns. Believe it or not, so have I. 2 here at St. Angela, 1 at my previous parish of St. Cecilia, and 1 at the parish before that of St. Charles Borromeo. Now, it might surprise you, but we priests do not benefit from capital campaigns, and we don't get a whole lot of money for other things. Even so, I found the means to double my pledge from last campaign to this campaign. And I have seen many pledges, like my own, there at the lower tier. But if just 140 families gave the minimum we were suggesting of $5,000 over 4 years, we would make our goal. And if the 1,400 remaining families that have not given anything would give $500, again, we would make our goal. Charity does not just prevent the sin of greed, it covers a multitude of other sins. Jesus promised that many blessings would come to those who give. Now, I don't believe it's greed that's the issue. I don't attribute that as the reason parishioners who have benefited greatly from this parish have not supported the campaign. I know we've had hard times due to COVID. I know many people have lost their jobs. I know many people are retired and are on fixed incomes. I also know that many in these same conditions found it in their hearts to give something. There was even a young boy in our parish, 8 years old, who gave $10. $10 is a fortune to an 8-year-old. It was very much like the widow's mite. That young man was precious in God's eyes. My guess is, too, that young man will never suffer from the sin of greed. But again, I say, I don't think it's greed per se, the desire to accumulate a lot, that leads to the problem. I think some of it is actually sloth. In other words, people who have a wait-and-see attitude, who like to say, oh, I think I'm going to contribute, but I need to see what things look like 6 months from now, a year from now, which is just fine if they actually do that. But what actually happens is that they forget. When we procrastinate, other things come along and we lose our focus. And as much as we wanted to help, it just slips our mind. And then we just say, well, too bad, maybe next time. But in the meantime, the parish suffers. We have to pick up the pieces. We have to plan for a shortfall. We have to make arrangements with the archdiocese. And the archdiocese attitude becomes, well, we won't make that mistake again. The mistake being they funded us everything we needed for the church and the administration building. It would even be helpful if people would just tell us, well, I can't contribute to this campaign. I'm sorry. That would help us plan. But it's the indifference, it's the inaction. It's we call, we write, we say, can you help us? And people just ignore us. So it may not be greed, it may not even be sloth, or it may be a subset of greed. You know, one of the parts of greed is miserliness. You know, a miser is not someone who wants to accumulate wealth, but wants to hold on to everything they get. The classic example, especially this time of year, is Ebenezer Scrooge from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Scrooge the miser would not help even when just a little bit would have gone a long way. And he learns a lesson in generosity when three spirits come and show him the consequences of his actions. So that is my pitch. Now, the gospel is not specifically about the St. Angela Merici Capital Campaign. It is, however, about preparing the way for the Lord. And what does St. John the Baptist tell us about that? Many people came to him asking the question, what can I do? What action can I take? In other words, remove the sloth for me so that I can make ready for the Lord. And what did John tell them? To the crowd, he says, whoever has 2 cloaks should share with the person who has none. Whoever has food should do likewise. To the tax collectors, he says, don't take more than you need to. Don't give in to greed. To the soldiers, he says, don't extort money from people. Be honest and be satisfied with what you have received. And the conclusion to that gospel is, then all the people were filled with expectation. Brothers and sisters, are you filled with expectation?